Our criminal justice system is completely broken. We have a system which allows injustice to spread throughout society, whilst the whilst the people who perpetrate crimes are left to roam free in our streets. They do not face accountability. They are not brought to justice. There are unprecedented amounts of delays. People are not getting the justice they deserve, and the justice system is discriminating against the very same vulnerable people that is supposed to support the most, whether that is disabled people, whether that is people who are of a minority ethnic background, or victims of rape. This is not a sustainable system. We have astronomical backlogs in our justice system. The courts are full beyond capacity, and the prison system is completely overwhelmed by the influx of new imprisonments. And the reason for this is twofold. One is austerity. Austerity decimated our public services, and justice bore the greatest brunt of these brutal cuts because it was an unprotected public service. And the consequence of that is that there's not enough capacity to meet the amount of crimes that are happening right now, but also the amount of prosecutions. Because the second reason is that we have had such a stringent prosecutions regime for so long. We have prosecuted people for minor crimes. We have favored prison sentences and incarceration over rehabilitation and community service. We have created a system that traps people in a cycle of crime and poverty rather than lifting them out of it. The criminal justice system is supposed to lift people out of that cycle of crime. It's supposed to break the cycle of wrongdoing, but instead, it perpetuates it. We need a justice system that's calibrated towards rehabilitation, that's calibrated towards preventing crime. That's why what we need is wide reform to the prison system and also to the sentencing regime. We need to change the prison industrial complex. Right now, the system is incentivized by private equity and the private industry that owns prisons and parts of the criminal justice system to incarcerate as many people as possible, to create a punitive sanctions regime. What we need is a focus on rehabilitation. We have limited programs to actually help people, for example, overcome substance misuse, to overcome different issues they might have. So what we need is investment in our prisons so that we can actually provide people with support. We can provide offenders with employment support. We can provide drug rehabilitation services. We can provide all the support services that are needed to reintegrate people into society. And that will support social cohesion drastically, and it will improve it a lot. It will also support the wider justice in society because it is a moral duty upon us to reintegrate the people who have fallen through the cracks of our system. And it is clear that most of the people who do go to prison and who do commit crimes and who do offend are doing it as a consequence of their poverty. Of course, I'm not excusing the crimes of people. I'm not excusing depravity. But the systems have to be in place to help prevent these crimes. We do not have to just be tough on crime, but also tough on the causes of crime. And that's why we need a more streamlined system and a far more effective system. And the way we achieve that is by having a system that actually caters towards improving people's lives and turning their lives around, rather than trapping them in a cycle of poverty and destitution and crime and wrongdoing. We also need to support prisoners after they get released. Right now, the probation service has been completely stripped to the bone. And that means that offenders do not get the support that they deserve and that they need. And then they risk falling through the cracks again and committing crimes again and returning to prison. And that overwhelms the system even more. Reoffending is a major cause of the strain on the prison system. And that's why we need to support probation services. But we also need a different approach in our economic institutions, because right now employers are unlikely to hire anyone who has a criminal record. What we need is employers that have designated accreditation to hire people who have previously offended so they can help turn their lives around. Companies like Timpson, who are providing a public service by helping prisoners who would have otherwise fallen back into a life of crime turn their lives around, to gain employment and to gain the skills that they need to improve their lives. That is what we need. And another thing that would support that is a job guarantee. It will also support the quest for full employment, and it would provide the support that all of society needs to achieve the social outcomes that we desire, rather than having unemployment by force. rather than creating a scarcity of jobs just to incentivize people to attain them. We can have a system that provides people with jobs when they're out of work so that we can get social value and they can also get value. This can be in shortage occupations, this can be in community service roles, so that there is never any gap in the capacity of the economy. And we can always sustain any needs we may have. And we can also sustain an economy with full employment. That was the ultimate goal of the economists of the 20th century. So why should it be any different for us? We should aim to maximize social welfare by having full employment. But it's also important to recognize that even if we have full employment, we should not push people singularly towards employment. We should also have an encouragement within the education system to divert people towards other routes, such as technical skills and entrepreneurship, because there is no linear path through life. So there should not be a linear path through the education system. And one of the most important ways that we can reduce crime and alleviate the strain in our justice system and the amount of pressure on social cohesion that we have in society is by having improved educational initiatives, by investing in the education in our schools. One of the most effective ways to prevent big ticket crimes like knife crime and shoplifting and other important issues that degrade the morality and the cohesion of our society is by investing in the education that helps prevent these issues. Workshops that convey the impact of knife crime, education about the law to actually inform young people about the impacts of crimes, but also why they are so damaging to society and why they may land them in trouble as well and damage their life prospects. That is the best form of deterrence, education. That is the best form of prevention, education. And the way that we invest in this education will make sure that we prevent crime for the long term rather than deterring it in the short term. The prison system is no longer a deterrent because sentences are so short, because there is such a likelihood of early release. And finally, we need increased investment into youth services, because one of the most crucial factors that push people into a life of crime, especially young people, is the absence of support in their lives, especially for those who grow up in difficult households, for those who grow up with difficult backgrounds and in tough neighborhoods and communities. That's why youth services are so important. That's why youth centers are so important. Yet these were often the first things that were cut under the conservative austerity program. That's why we need a radical program of public investment to provide the education that will prevent crime, to provide the youth services that will prevent crime, to provide the probation services and the prison's capacity and the court's capacity to deal with the influx of cases, to deal with the amount of prisoners that we have, to deal with the inevitable support that we need to provide these prisoners after their release. Upon their release, it is so important that we invest in the public services that we need, that we invest in all the different areas of society that we need, that we do not neglect the small little things, because these are the most important factors that can compound over time to prevent the degradation of our society, the degradation of this collective morality of our society, the cohesion of our society. And the way we do that is by preventing crime and investing in different strategies across the board rather than a narrow focus on prison, imprisonment, and incarceration. That is why it is so important that we invest, that we have the public investment that our society and our nation and our institutions desperately need. As John Maynard Keynes said, anything we can do, we can afford. Austerity is a myth. The deficit is an illusion. We should not worry about not having enough money to pay for things because we always have enough money to pay for things. The only constraint on our spending is real resources and inflation. We should not entertain the deficit myth any longer. We should stop chasing the growth delusion, and instead we should chase social well-being and improve social outcomes and collective social progress, not wealth and accumulation of resources and economic power in the hands of a few. We need radical changes in our economy, radical changes in our approach to policymaking and our social structures to change society for the better.